Hi, welcome in everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment here. Thank you for joining us today. We'll give everyone just another moment here with a few people entering. Thanks again for being here. Happy New Year. Off to a busy start. Everything in 2024 seems like 2 years ago already.
It is pretty wild how it's only the 13th and it seems so busy so far. Lots of good stuff getting done though.
All right, we will continue to let folks kind of trickle in here, but lots to cover today. So I think we will go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. We're really pleased to have everyone here again with us in the new year as we start entering educational material reviews for the Recycling Modernization Act. I believe we will have some new folks joining us today, so that may not have seen our introductory and USCL communications webinars last year. If you missed any of those webinars and want a deep dive on how we got here so far, the recordings are available to watch at your leisure. And Ari will drop a link into the chat for you now, so feel free to bookmark that page where you can find past webinar recordings. And we'll cover some of the background from those presentations today, such as upcoming actions and project timing, but in briefer form. The purpose of this webinar is to serve local governments, service providers, and community-based organizations with information about education and outreach efforts. And today we'll be reviewing a beta set of educational materials and introducing a feedback survey. So if you're not a local government, service provider, or community-based organization, this webinar may not be as helpful for you. So just wanted to let folks know that upfront before we get underway. So we're really excited to be here with you today, kicking off 2025. We hope you are too as we continue toward launch this year. Today, we're going to start with introductions, talk more about the engagement process, give a recap of the motivational campaign updates shared at the ORSAC full committee meeting last month for anyone that missed it. We'll review the localized materials and then share details about the feedback survey that will be open to you following the conclusion of this webinar. And before I hand it over to Alex with Circular Action Alliance, I wanted to go over some logistics for today. The chat is open as we're going to be asking attendees to let us know who's with us today. However, if you do have a question, we please ask that you use the Q&A function, as that will allow us to address some questions as we go along. We have many subject experts here today to help with that. So any questions, comments, please use the Q&A. That is a different section than the chat. So we have a lot of team members on the call today, and I'll first hand it over to Alex with Circular Action Alliance to begin our introductions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for everyone who's here today. My name is Alex Bertolucci, as many of you know, and I'm the Oregon Communications Manager for Circular Action Alliance. And I'm excited to be taking one step closer to launching the first education and outreach materials. Before we get there, though, let's introduce some more of the growing Oregon team. So since the last time many of you were on on a webinar with us, we've added a few new team members to the CAA Oregon team. Tanya Allison and Greg Johannes are both new members. And I'm also very excited to introduce our new bilingual Oregon communications specialist, Jerry, who's on the call today. And as always, please continue to reach out to us if you have any questions or you see us around, and we're more than happy to chat about what's coming. So thanks. I'll turn it back to you, Sam.
Thanks so much. And for anyone that is not familiar with the Recycling Partnership, we pride ourselves on being a team of experts, practitioners, and thought leaders with real-world experience who are delivering on our mission of building a better recycling system. And we have a nice crew with us again today to help us run the show and answer questions that you'll be interacting with. So I'll hand it over to Emily to introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Krieger. I work for the Recycling Partnership with Sam, and I'm responsible for doing the project management for the education and outreach work. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Allison.
Hi, my name is Allison Francis. I work with the Recycling Partnership and I am the creative director. I've worked closely with the teams on CAA and the Recycling Partnership on the education and outreach materials that you'll see today. And I will pass it to Dan.
Hi folks, good to see everybody again. Dan Leaf, Policy Implementation Director here at the Recycling Partnership. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and I really work to be the eyes and ears on the ground of the organization here as we move into implementation and work closely with Circular Action Alliance. So yeah, really excited to be part of this ongoing project. And I will move it over to Ari.
Ari, it looks like you are still muted.
Oops, I thought I clicked it. My apologies. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Ari Lewis, and I also serve on the policy team with Dan. And I've been serving in the role on the education outreach team supporting the project. And I'm located in Southern California. So I'll head over to you, Sam.
Thanks so much, Ari. Ari juggling a lot of things today, not just a webinar. So thank you everybody for being here. So hello again, my name is Samantha Longshore and I'm a community program manager for the Recycling Partnership. I'm here on behalf of CAA to assist with local government, service provider, and community-based organization communications around education and outreach efforts during this coordination phase. And today I also wanted to mention C+C, who is another key partner for this work, and acknowledge all of their contributions so far. C+C supported the user survey and much of the work that we'll be recapping today, including development of the statewide brand and logo, creating the campaign concept, and they are also supporting CAA in provision of the transcreations for the first batches of educational materials, some of which you'll be seeing today. All right, so you've heard who we are. Now we would love to just get to know each of you a bit more. If you've been here before, you are used to this. It is time to jump into the chat. So please, in the chat feature, let us know who you are, what's your name, what community or organization are you representing, and what is your role. So again, just please take a moment to jump into the chat and introduce yourselves. We'd just love to see everybody who has joined us so far today. Hi, Alex, welcome. Dakota and Donnie, Jennifer, wonderful. There's some Oregon DEQ in the house. Welcome, everybody. Some master recyclers with us. Excellent. Some of our service providers here, county reps, city reps. Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. So feel free to keep that going. Again, feel free to your name, the community or the organization that you're with, and the role. Feel free to keep introducing yourselves into the chat there. We really appreciate it. Nice seeing everybody here. Excellent. So now let's get into it. We'll start with an update on the engagement process and a reminder, if you want more detail, please make sure to watch the recordings of the introductory and USCL communications webinars if you missed them. So we held those last year. Ari will drop a link to find the recordings in the chat one more time for folks who may not have been able to join right at the hour. So on that link, you will be able to find recordings of the past webinars, including today's, as soon as that is posted. And here we have a high-level overview of the phases for education and outreach implementation, which are outlined in CAA's Oregon program plan that was submitted to DEQ. And this helps to illustrate and reinforce the message from DEQ that the first program plan will be a time for continued consultations between CAA and interest holders. So we really want to think of this effort not as a light switch, kind of an on-off change, but it's composed of rolling phases, working to help build upon each other by providing new information and then tweaking, reinforcing, and being able to give different audiences what they personally need to meet them where they're at through these phases. And this slide provides a nice overview of our presentation today. We'll be recapping updates on the statewide motivational campaign and closing with a review of the first localized instructional educational materials. And I want to highlight the various channels for delivery of these campaigns, which include digital and non-digital avenues, so that we can reach everyone through methods that are available to them, such as materials they have in hand, over the air, in print, and several other forms. We want this to be as inclusive as possible. And here is a snapshot of some of the engagement work completed to date, including statewide audience research, presentations with the Recycling Council E&O subcommittee, statewide webinars for this group of interest holders that we discussed earlier that were held last year, a workshop session at the AOR Fall Forum in October, and listening sessions with 10 CBOs and one tribal organization at the end of last year with the assistance of and hosted by Trash for Peace. As we kick off the new year, CAA is establishing additional channels of communications, including a webinar series and newsletter beginning this month. And in the table here, you'll find our tentative schedule for upcoming educational material reviews. Dates will be confirmed, and registration for these upcoming webinars will be distributed in upcoming marketing emails, which you receive from me. If anyone is not yet on our education and outreach mailing list and isn't receiving emails from me about these opportunities, we please ask that you fill out the contact form for this group. Ari is going to drop a link to that in the chat. So if you've already completed this form, you don't need to do so again. And as a reminder, this form is for those that are distributing education at the local level. So if we have any producers or other organizations with us today that don't serve those roles, please note that this form is not for you. In coordination with the material reviews shown on the previous slide, this flowchart helps to illustrate an approach to educational material design modeled for continuous improvement. You can think about this in two primary phases. The first begins with drafts provided in English. Please note that the materials in Batch 1A that we're reviewing today are a little bit of an exception, as there will be some Spanish elements for review in this beta group. But for future materials, we'll follow this process shown. We'll host the webinar twice so that folks have a couple opportunities to attend live or watch the recording before completing the feedback survey. Feedback will also be gathered through the ORSAC E&O committee and additional CBO consultations. With this feedback, the materials will then be revised and transcreated. In the second phase, the materials will be released in all languages per the program plan schedule, and CAA will lead follow-up and more in-depth consultations during the first program plan that allows for monitoring use, gathering feedback, and then adapting and updating based on that feedback to fit needs in an ongoing capacity. And as a reminder, here are the 4 batches of educational materials from the program plan that will be moving through that continuous improvement model. And today we'll be reviewing betas of the Batch 1 materials you see here. These have been expedited to allow for review, feedback, and dissemination by February 1st. But before we get to those materials, we'll be providing an update on the statewide motivational campaign and concept in development, which you see towards batches 3 and 4. What follows in this section is a recap of the campaign concept update that was presented at the ORSAC full committee meeting on December 13th. And before we jump in, Ari is going to start a quick poll for us. We would love to use this poll just to know how many folks with us today attended that December 13th meeting in which C+C presented the campaign concept, which is the public-facing motivational themes, so that we know how many people joining us today are familiar with the recap that we're going to provide. So give folks a little bit of time to finish that. Thanks so much for jumping into the poll. So it looks like we do have a nice mix. A decent amount of folks were able to join that December 13th meeting for the sneak peek of the campaign concept. So I'll give another moment or two. Feel free to jump into the poll. Let us know if you recall seeing that presentation. It was a long meeting, a lot of different things covered, education and outreach at the end. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that poll. Excellent. So over half are familiar with that presentation. So the next few slides will be familiar for you. Another bunch of folks here, 38% was not able to see that presentation. So excellent. So thanks so much. I'm glad we'll be able to provide some of these updates for folks. Okay. Excellent. So what follows is the campaign concept that will guide the statewide motivational aspects of the education and outreach plan that you see here on the right-hand side of the diagram. So for those who did miss the December 13th meeting and would like a deeper dive of this content, Ari will drop a couple links into the chat now. The first is for the ORSAC Council website, where you can find the slides under the previous meetings section. And then the second link will take you to a recording of the E&O section of that presentation. So if you would like to watch the recording and see that full presentation around the concept, please feel free to jump in and watch that video. It was a really excellent presentation by C+C. So I would highly recommend if you weren't able to make it. And here is a high-level overview of the campaign development process so far, presented by Creative Partners C+C. It began with research aimed at gathering baseline data on recycling perceptions and insights to inform the campaign. Key insights were that Oregonians already have a strong belief in the benefits of recycling. They think recycling is easy and they self-rate their knowledge as high, yet they do still report feeling confusion and doing some problematic behaviors like bagging their recycling. And the message of simplifying and improving recycling really resonated with them. From here, a brand strategy and identity forms, shaping a campaign strategy and its concept, which is what we'll be providing a recap of today. While a lot of work has gone into this so far, the next steps are developing campaign materials with which to launch the brand and campaign, and then ongoing messaging and expansion. So here you can see those last three steps and what they look like over a full timeline. So launching this summer and then continuing to develop and grow into 2026 and beyond. So a lot of work so far, but a lot of work ahead of us as well as we move through these pieces. Through this work and many iterations, we have the Recycle On brand. And this brand does a lot of legwork. It must be legally protectable while also being simple, straightforward, and flexible to speak to a broad audience of Oregonians, create well into Spanish and be culturally appropriate, and provide a single umbrella that many future messages and campaigns can live under. And it must deliver on the brand strategy. The mission: make recycling easier and more effective with convenient services, clear guidance, and meaningful support so all can participate in a trusted system that works. Its attributes: reliable, trusted, empathetic, and bold. And in Spanish, it continues the same trajectory of a simple, inviting, and encouraging message for Spanish speakers to be a part of making a better recycling program in Oregon. And it's important to understand that the brand messaging will evolve. It can't do everything all at once. So the brand has a life cycle. It will change. And we're at the beginning. The campaign concept is for this initial wave to inform the ads for what we call wave one, which are overarching themes. The creative partner that C+C is seeking to hire right now will create these ads for the first and future waves. So CAA isn't doing this on their own. They are continually looking to collaborate with experts in their field and the region. In waves 2 and 3, which you'll start seeing in green, they begin having more specific messaging, such as contamination reduction, and really dig in and provide more assistance and detail for the public through the statewide campaign, continuing to complement the materials we're building for deployment at the local level. So what you're about to see are initial ideas of what the campaign will look, feel, and sound like. It's sample visual style, headlines, video ad scripts, and other execution ideas. What we're about to show are not exact drafts or final versions. So a campaign creative concept is an overarching idea to capture audience attention, create an emotional response, and inspire action with unifying themes to resonate with our audiences while being big enough to expand in the future. This concept is We've Got This, Oregon. This begins with a lot of different concepts brought down to about 50 ideas to 10, and then down to around 6 campaigns, as C+C calls them. From there, it works further down to about 3. And what you're seeing today is the hero, the winner. But there was a lot of work that went into this and getting down to this point with the best way to get these messages across. So keep in mind that these upcoming examples are the first wave, and later messages will dial in on participation or contamination at a local level. But this is the 30,000-foot idea. And this concept can turn into voice ads, for example, for radio or for television. So something like this. We have a special way of doing things here in Oregon. Some of us like to be weird. Others might like their wide open spaces. But no matter who we are or where we live, we're not just satisfied with being average and rolling out the status quo every few years. So we're making our recycling system better. This concept can turn into print ads found in your community on billboards, at bus stops, and complementing educational materials provided locally. Additional visuals could relate to headlines, such as showing Mount Hood in comparison to the kitchen, and gives room to bring focus to other areas, big and small, around the state, so well-known and local spots. So as a reminder, what you've seen here are concepts that would be developed into real assets over the course of the next few months. The final assets might appear on various media channels, on the Pro website and social media, and the like. CAA, again, is in the process of securing a creative agency to develop the concept into those assets, and local governments, service providers, and community-based organizations will be involved in the reviews of these materials later in the year and prior to program launch. So kind of a sneak peek for you there. And next, we are going to pivot from our statewide motivational work back to our localized and instructional work. As a reminder, these assets that we'll review today include the USCL guide, the USCL imagery and terms, the cart label, and newsletter content. First, we wanted to share some of the key themes that we heard from our recent USCL communications survey that followed our last webinar last year. We were pleased to receive feedback from a mix of a confederated tribe, city and county governments, a mix of service providers representing both urban and rural communities, from large to small in size, and dispersed from north, east, west, and central Oregon. We saw a need for flexibility and community-specific customization that allows for consistency across material streams and strong data to support the approaches. We also saw a desire to customize educational materials in a templated way that ensures that materials sent out across the state have a consistent and simple look that quickly conveys this as a statewide program and doesn't leave anyone feeling left out or left behind. The importance of thoughtful, responsive engagement on the transcreation process was expressed, as well as conversations we can have now about Indigenous languages and future needs. An awareness of media coverage throughout the state, ensuring reach of the broad message with strong local messaging, was something folks really wanted to see from the campaign to ensure that each region is considered and covered with their specific needs. We also heard the importance of an easy-to-use design portal, accessible to everyone, and material and messaging formats that are easy to distribute. So we continue to gather additional considerations to layer with that, including being inclusive and avoiding disenfranchisement of specific populations, enabling excellent production quality on print formats of all sizes for flexibility, avoiding violating any legal provisions resulting from not seeking or receiving express permission to use brand images, avoiding creating cognitive bias among residents by presenting one branded product that may not create recognition of similar accepted materials, and avoiding creating a sense of favoritism among producers. So while we enter this new world that is EPR and we're at the forefront in the US, we know that there's going to be change and it's going to be good change. And we're excited to be here and be a part of this journey with all of you. And here is where we bring all of that feedback and the needs and considerations of this new framework that we're a part of. Included here is a high-level process we follow and the journey we're on to integrate the needs and considerations of all interested parties in a way that provides high-performing materials and messaging that creates the most understanding. The first is applying a transcreation lens to identify what elements of an image are needed, what can't we lose to ensure it resonates with people and creates understanding. And we explore the considerations needed as part of living in an EPR world. What needs to change to make sure we have systems and materials that work for all, followed by user testing and new imagery concepts, and then examining which products create the most recognition. And through this process, the result is a new look and feel that reinforces this message that we are modernizing the system. In terms of guidelines for relevant starting products, where we start this process from, we want to make sure that selections connect with the widest audience by starting from universally recognized products for a quick read, with high contrast labels, ensuring they represent economically cost-effective products, avoiding private labels and specialty products. When those baseline materials are selected, we can ensure relevant material images are used to connect with communities by partnering with third-party experts for recommendations on all trans-created images. As we began our research on imagery resonance, we had hypothesis that the high detail style on the right would test best, but we found there is more resonance when presented with the medium detail level. Please note again that these images are used in research, and these are not the final assets that you will see later. We also found that the medium level of detail allowed recognition that a bottle itself, one that was consistent with a laundry detergent bottle, was recognizable and recyclable. This is important as our research has indicated that when one recognizes a brand, for example, a Tide laundry detergent bottle, they can experience cognitive bias and are sometimes unable to recognize other brands of the same packaging type as also recyclable. So this is just an example of the type of learning that allows us to follow those threads for more detail as we home in on the best iteration. And I do love this slide because you can see the level of detail being tested, the small shift studied to find the best product. And just to note that a more detailed report on these findings is expected this year. And before we dive into material reviews, we did want to touch on the process for creation and transcreation for these materials with some additional information from our partner, C+C, who is an expert in this field. Included here is a shared vision from C+C and the Recycling Partnership. Transcreation is the process of adapting content from one language and culture to another while maintaining its intent, style, tone, and context. This involves a creative adaptation process that ensures the message, whether written or visual, resonates with the target audience both culturally and emotionally. C+C's in-house multicultural team collaborates with a network of certified translators and interpreters developed through long-term relationships with partner community-based organizations, work on previous client projects, and accessing the Washington State Coalition for Language Access's directory of translators and interpreters. Their trusted partners provide referrals of linguists across various multicultural communities to ensure messaging aligns with local customs, values, and idiomatic expressions that can convey figurative meaning rather than literal. And I always enjoy a chance to look at C+C's past work in this arena, some of which includes a COVID-19 education and prevention program with the Washington State Department of Health. The videos are really fantastic if you get an opportunity to look for those. A food waste prevention program and Odes to Recycling with WM, which was created in coordination with the community for the community, and guides, campaigns, and community outreach in partnership with King County Solid Waste. So just a sampling here of past work. And now the moment we've all been waiting for that I'm excited for, we'll dive into the Batch 1A beta educational materials that are now available for your review. So first, we are going to talk through the USCL guide. Then we'll dig into the imagery designed for this guide and upcoming educational materials. After that, we'll review the cart label and newsletter article for inclusion and distribution at the local level. And we know these materials can be kind of a funny group because we have one of the most detailed documents in the USCL guide, one of the simplest and most concise pieces in the cart label, and a written article harkening more to the tie-in between motivational and instructional. However, a style playbook will be provided in the next group of materials, Batch 1B, and this will help ensure that the public experiences a unified aesthetic and feel whenever and wherever they receive recycling information in the state. So that will include a phased messaging timeline to help provide recommendations for how these pieces can be utilized and when. We'll also provide some examples of that as we move through now. With this first review webinar, the official feedback survey for Batch 1A beta educational materials is now live, and Ari will be dropping a link to the survey in the chat. So feel free to bookmark this so you can complete this by next Thursday, or start exploring that today after close of the webinar. And I am going to quickly share with everybody what the survey looks like and the materials that you will be able to download today. So what you are seeing here, if anyone participated in the USCL survey last year, you will find the same format for this survey here. Again, Ari is sharing the link in the chat. You will also receive an email with this link as well. So there are sections for each of the materials to be reviewed, but most importantly, I want to just point out for everybody here that you will be able to download a folder with the draft materials for review. So if you follow that link, you will be taken to this light box available for your download. So you can download all of the files here. You can download them individually, but here you'll see that they are labeled and match your different sections of the survey. So we have the cart label, we have the newsletter article, we have the USCL text. So this is all of the individual text and pieces to compose the educational materials. You have a document with just the imagery, and then the USCL guide. So again, just want to make sure that everybody is aware that within that survey, that is where you will find the download to go to this folder. So you will have lots of time to sit with those materials, take your time, share with other team members before completing that survey. So just wanted everybody to be aware of that. So please note that the folder that we just showed you for download will close after the survey deadline, which is next Thursday, January 23rd at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So please submit your feedback by that date and time to allow us to begin reviewing your feedback. So it is a bit of a quick turnaround for this Batch 1A. And then in addition to the feedback survey, which will be distributed again via email, just so that you're aware, so multiple times to get it, after the recording of this webinar is available. So we encourage anybody that didn't attend today or the webinar next Tuesday to watch a recording, which we'll also send out via email. And then just a reminder that the webinar next Tuesday is a repeat of this content that you're seeing today. So if you're here today, you don't need to be in attendance next Tuesday. We're just giving folks a couple opportunities to attend these webinars live. So a reminder, please submit your feedback on these materials by next Thursday, January 23rd at 12 p.m. Pacific. All right, up first is the USCL guide, our most detailed of the materials today. We would recommend using this material at launch. Please note this guide is specifically for communities that are launching these changes July 1, so you will see references to that date in this document. As the most detailed educational material, the USCL guide includes all accepted materials, along with top contaminants identified by DEQ for programs with and without glass collected alongside curbside materials or with additional metal products. So both templates will be available at launch. At the top of the document, you'll find information to help introduce the program and its impacts on accepted materials. The guide could be incorporated into existing or new outreach methods such as handouts, e-newsletters, bill inserts, or websites. And what you see here is an example only, but illustrates how these materials will look with local and statewide campaign logos coming together, so we start to see that integration of the broader Recycle On messaging with localized education. The USCL guide leverages classic recycling blue, a recognizable color associated with recycling in the US, as well as Roboto font, which will ensure seamless use in the education and outreach portal, where folks can customize designs while keeping a clean, clear look. And there is important real estate available for community level customization through logos and contact information and the ability to choose languages and materials specific to your community. The next educational elements for your review is USCL imagery and text. So these are the individual components and building blocks of the educational materials. These materials could be used at launch or after launch of other main educational materials to supplement that messaging. As an example, they could be used in material-specific posts or education where you want to focus on particular categories. Included in the downloadable folder that I showed you earlier, you'll find a document with the unique USCL text to accompany the imagery for your review as well. So you will have both of those pieces. Ultimately, images will be available in high res, low res, in clusters, and individually. The clusters of 5 to 7 items ensure we address the full spectrum of packaging sizes and shapes for a specific material, which aids in recognition and recall of what is recyclable. The front of containers are always present in the images, with angles where needed to help clearly show the product type. Images use high contrast labels and approximate shapes, sizes, and colors to create generic images that focus on the package's contents rather than brand. An example is showing an orange on the juice carton instead of showing a reference to any specific brand of orange juice. Black outlines help to highlight product shapes, a key piece of recognizing a product. It also ensures that more transparent packages are visible and identifiable. Unlike accepted material images, contaminants don't have particular shape and color associations as they represent larger categories than products, things like food and liquids. High contrast icons successfully represent categories of contaminants and can communicate these at smaller sizes. In coordination with words and a single red line across the icon, they signal what it is and that it doesn't belong in recycling. Next, we have the cart label. This we see more as a tertiary material that can be implemented as needed, such as providing to a cart manufacturer or a hauler for inclusion on lids before future cart distributions. Some communities may also choose to use this proactively and update carts in the field through a re-stickering project. You'll see the consistency of that classic recycling blue and Roboto fonts. As mentioned earlier, this is one of the simplest designs where the goal is to ensure that folks identify the correct container. It includes all languages identified in the program plan, so this can be utilized throughout the community with consistency. We know that at the cart, information should be clear and simple, and detailed information should be found indoors on such things as mailers provided to the community. When thinking of such information as a phone number to ask a question, we know that folks will turn to their phone or a mailer they posted on the fridge to find who to contact rather than walking out to the cart. So all of these considerations improve the longevity of the label, prioritizing key information available to all and limiting information that can change in the future and require those future expensive or labor-intensive restickering projects or leaving material that is out of date on the cart. And finally, we have the newsletter copy available for your review. We recommend using this language at launch. You can consider incorporating it into existing or new outreach methods. The newsletter article hits 3 main themes: what's changing, why this matters, and what you can do. This is meant to give you a nice head start on your advertisements for launch, and this can be edited to reflect your local experience as well. So this is grab and go copy for you. So in the slide we reviewed earlier showing the flow chart of a continuous improvement process around transcreation, I mentioned that these first batches have some exceptions. In the asset folder available for download, you will find Spanish versions of the imagery and terminology, as well as the newsletter. The cart label, as we showed in the slide, has all translations. Transcreation of the USCL guide will follow and be ready for February 1st beta release. But for these Spanish assets, we just want to reiterate that your input is needed. In the legislation, it outlines that local governments have a responsibility to ensure that educational resources meet the needs of diverse audiences within their communities. For subsequent reviews of educational materials, where English drafts will be available first, CAA will invite local governments and service providers to provide ongoing feedback for these additional transcreated elements after release to allow for that continuous improvement model of review, adaptation, and improvement. So here we are in the final stretch. I hope you're really excited to download those assets for review and start taking a look at that feedback survey. So we will leave you with just a few more next steps. As mentioned earlier, if you attended today's webinar, you don't need to attend the webinar scheduled for next Tuesday, the 21st. Again, this is a repeat webinar to give more folks an opportunity to join us live. The feedback survey for the educational materials shown today is live, so we look forward to hearing from you no later than next Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific. And Ari will drop a link to that feedback survey for you again in the chat, so you can jump into that right away if you choose. And please keep an eye out for upcoming emails from me, which will include a recording of today's webinar, a link to the feedback survey again to make sure that folks have it, and registration links for future webinars will be coming to review upcoming batches of educational materials. We will be reviewing batch 1B in February, so we hope to see you all again then as well. And one final plug to anyone not yet on our education and outreach mailing list. If you haven't been receiving update emails from me, please fill out our contact form that Ari will drop into the chat one more time for folks. As a reminder, this is for those distributing education at the local level. So if we have producers or other organizations with us today that don't serve those roles, please note that this form is not relevant for you. And if anyone has filled out that form before, you do not need to fill it out again. And included for your reference here is the remaining timeline for these batches. As you can see, we are at webinar and survey time today. We will then very quickly after the close of the survey be analyzing results in order to refine these materials, complete and update transcreation, and then release on February 1st. A reminder that after release, we'll begin another iteration process for continual improvement of materials. On February 1st, when the betas of the educational materials shown today are released, you'll receive an email announcement from CAA, including a link to access and download the assets in English and Spanish, and a summary of feedback received and adaptation applied. A quick note to please make sure that following the asset release on February 1st, that you archive or delete the files available for download today for feedback, just to make sure that everyone has the most up-to-date versions as of February 1st, because there likely may be some changes to the pieces that you are downloading today. Included here is the review process for the next educational materials for review in batch 1B and 2. You'll find the iterative process after your initial review to continue providing feedback for incorporation in an ongoing basis. We anticipate that batch 1 webinars will be held in late February, and batch 2 will take place a couple weeks later in mid and late March. So please keep an eye out for those registration invites from me. Batches 3 and 4 move into the statewide motivational assets, which are currently in the scoping and planning phase. So details for these assets will be confirmed as soon as possible. And we're going to use the last of our time together for some additional Q&A time. But before we jump into that, we just wanted to thank all of you for spending your time with us today and for engaging with this process to make the effort really successful. A reminder for anyone that may need to hop, this webinar will be posted online on CAA's website, and we'll send a thank you email with that location and a link to the feedback survey again. So please keep an eye out from that email. That will come from me. So thank you again. Please stick around if you have some additional questions to drop into the Q&A. And if not, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your feedback survey responses.
Well, Sam, the Q&A looks a little quiet today. Maybe folks are busy looking at those new materials, downloading those, seeing what's there. But folks, yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop those into the Q&A. All right, let's see. Could you share any feedback that's been provided through surveys that has led to changes in these materials? That's a great question, and we're not going to provide that yet. Today, we'll provide that when we release the materials on February 1st or by February 1st. So we'll make sure to have that for these as at that time. And to that last point, we received a lot of feedback on the campaign concept that we've got this Oregon, and that won't be shared because we're not launching that one yet. But we will share that later as we develop more of those, and there will be more time for engagement on those topics as well as we work on those statewide ad campaigns that launch in August. There's a question, are the final drafts being approved by the Recycling Council or DEQ? Per statute, DEQ does need to approve the final drafts. The Recycling Council has been consulted with as statute requires, and that was done on that December 13th of just a month ago, in fact, to the day. So at that last meeting is when we provided information to the Recycling Council. So they've provided feedback, but DEQ will be approving it. Kate asked, does your research support not having imagery on the decals? If so, can you share more about that? The decal that was shared is just the cart label. So there will be other decals that do have imagery on them, specifically for things like the multifamily or commercial sectors. But I do believe that there's some research from TRP that shows that once folks make it to the bin, maybe that's not the best time to try and influence where they're putting things.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what we were saying, that folks were sort of making up their minds about what they were recycling before they were carrying it out. So they weren't looking to the cart again to sort of make that decision or to determine what was available there. And again, that leads to really trying to keep that key information on the cart label so that folks can identify that right container, and then it really increases that longevity of the label in place of perhaps having labels that are out of date as things, may change and materials may change in the future.
That's a great point, Sam. There are going to be a lot of changes over the next couple of years as more items are added to the USCL or as different programs kind of switch around. So having items that survive a little bit longer is important. So we're not constantly having to get rid of and make new decals. There's a question. Do you know if Portland Metro will continue to have container shape restrictions, like not accepting square polypropylene tubs? The shape restrictions, if that's what we're going to call them, is just 2 inches by 2 inches or larger. There aren't, otherwise it's kind of more specific to the type, but I do believe there is a question, and maybe Dan, you can help me out on this one, about PET thermoform tubs wouldn't be accepted, but I don't think that has anything to do with the shape, but more so the material. All right. There's a question. Can you elaborate now or in future webinars, newsletters about your plan for providing similar imagery for other streams? Yeah, great question. So that the other streams of materials such as garbage and composting, CAA is still committed to developing those materials, those other photorealistic illustrations. And Emily, maybe give me a thumbs up if this is correct or not, but I believe those are going to be as part of the April material batches that will be launched is when we are planning to have those ready. Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Emily. It's a lot of dates, so it's sometimes hard to keep them all straight.
Yes, and date related, I also just answered a question about how the Batch 1A betas will be released. So as Sam mentioned during the presentation, there will be an email that will go out with a link to download. The Education and Outreach portal will be made available later this year.
Yeah, so these initial materials will simply be shared out as links to downloadable items. So it won't be fancy editable like the portal will be after that goes live later this year, but there will be, you'll be able to access these materials. The beta materials are really there. We had requests, and DEQ had requests from local governments and service providers who needed to plan well in advance for things like their newsletter, where they kind of takes 4 or 6 months to get those ready and to the printer and reviewed and everything. And so they asked to have some of these materials early. And so that's what these beta materials are being made available for. It is still too early to be sharing most of these materials with your constituents or your community. So we wouldn't recommend taking the USCL guide and immediately sending it out or anything like that. But again, that messaging calendar or guidelines will be coming in a future batch as well. And so you'll be able to see some of those suggestions that we have for when you message different pieces of USCL launches or the changes that the RMA is going to have in your community. There's a question that says, I noticed the USL images have both caps in the cartons and the plastic section. Was this flagged as not recyclable? That is a keen eye you have there. And caps are accepted on plastic bottles in the USCL. So those ones will stay, but the caps will be removed from the carton section on the USCL. That was a bit of an oversight. So, but that's been flagged, and thank you for that feedback on that as well. I love working with all the recyclers out there because they're so keen on like, oh, I know this one. I see that. We got to make sure it's good. So that's awesome to see so many folks paying attention, already looking at the materials too. That's super exciting. Well, it looks like the questions have dried up a bit there. Again, y'all, we really appreciate your feedback. We do take it into account and make sure that we try to incorporate it, or we'll share back how we do incorporate it or not. And we're moving quick on these ones. So we look forward to seeing all of your feedback and what everybody can provide for us and your thoughts on these materials in that survey. Sam, anything else you want to wrap up with? It seems like we're
I think that's it. Just thanks again, everybody. Good crowd here today. And hope everybody is kind of digging into those materials in that review. So look forward to everyone's review by next Thursday, the 23rd by 12 p.m. We will dig into that feedback right away after that close. But thank you again, everybody, for being here. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.